So today I'm going to be discussing the 5 S's of lean, and I'm going to explain all of those, but you make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to be providing 4 pro 5S tips. You're not going to want to miss these. And specifically, by the end of this video, you should understand the definition of 5S, know why 5S is important, know what the 5 S's actually stand for, both in Japanese and English, know the benefits of 5S, and spoiler alert, but one of the pro tips I'm going to share with you is how you can recognize which of the 5 S's belong to the area operator or whoever owns the area that the 5S is being performed in, and which of the 5 S's belong to management or the supervisor. And trust me when I say that you're going to want to stick around until the end to hear all of these pro tips, plus this really embarrassing story that happened to me when I was a young engineer, and it involves 5S, and I'm only going to tell you this story because I don't want you to do what I did as a young engineer. Hi, my name is Chad Burrows, and if you want to learn lean, Kaizen, and root cause analysis, then you are on the right channel. And if you're like most people, you like free stuff, you like free content, so why not subscribe to this channel because it is free. Likewise, if you want to do a good deed for the day, all you have to do is tap out on that like button, because when you do that, it helps promote the video so others will see this 5S video, and hopefully it helped them as well. Now, if I were teaching a college course about lean, 5S would be one of the first classes or courses that I would teach, because it's a fundamental pillar in which we can build lean on. And you know, if you can't even maintain a good 5S program, then how are you going to maintain any of the other standards that go along with having a lean environment? And there is this old saying that says, without 5S, forget the rest. And I don't remember who said it, but I know that that's a famous saying, and it does hold true. If you can't have a good 5S program that you can sustain, doesn't mean we're always perfect. Sometimes we drift back or backslide. It just means that we need a good 5S program in place that we can build on and ensure that sustainment. But if we can't maintain that for the long haul, we may as well forget about lean. And in today's fast-paced competitive world, businesses are constantly seeking ways to enhance productivity, reduce waste, and streamline processes. One highly effective approach that has gained significant traction is the 5S methodology. Now, originally developed in Japan, although let's be honest, Ford actually had a program called Can Do that was very similar to 5S. The 5S methodology offers a structured framework for organizing and maintaining workspaces, resulting in increased efficiency, improved safety, and a more conducive environment for growth. Now let's dive into the details of the 5S methodology and how it can revolutionize your workspace. And the 5S methodology is built upon 5 fundamental principles, and we represent these principles with 5 words. And I'm going to read out the words in Japanese and English so we have both of those. And then I'm going to define each. The first one is sort, or sere. And this step involves sorting through all items in a workspace and distinguishing between essential and non-essential items. Unnecessary items are removed, creating a clutter-free environment. This not only increases space, and specifically your workspace, but also reduces the time wasted searching for materials and or tools that you might need. The second S in 5S is set in order. The Japanese word for set in order is seiton. After you declutter everything from the first S, you want to make sure that you go in and start organizing everything in an organized way, meaning that the remaining items that you have left, put those in an orderly and efficient manner. Tools, equipment, and materials should have designated places, making them easily accessible when needed. This minimizes the time spent searching and promotes a more structured workflow. And then we get to the third S in 5S, which is shine, or seiso in Japanese. And with shine, we want to make sure that we're not just decluttering, but we're also making sure we have some sort of frequency or cadence that we're cleaning everything, right? Especially if you have a work desk or if you have equipment. So this is true for operations and manufacturing, and also an office environment. Regular cleaning ensures that our machines, tools, or just our workspace remains in a good working fashion, right? If we clean everything, then we're more likely to see something when it's out of place. For example, suppose we had a machine that had an oil leak. We go out, we clean up, we fix the oil leak, at least we think we do, but now it's nice and clean, and so when the machine starts to leak again, we can easily see the oil leak. And cleaning up that oil means that not only can we see the oil if it leaks again, but we can create a more safe working environment, and this promotes a sense of pride within the workforce. Typically, an area that is dirty tends to stay dirty, but once we clean it up, oftentimes folks will want to pitch in and make sure that area stays clean. So that promotes ownership. And the fourth S in 5S is standardize, or seiketsu. And consistency is key in maintaining the improvements achieved through the first 3 S's. And in order to maintain that consistency, we want to make sure we standardize. Standardize processes and procedures, ensuring that a clean and organized workspace not just is a happenstance or happens every so often, but it's the norm. It's part of the culture. Now, this step involves creating clear guidelines, visual aids, and documentation to support ongoing organizational efforts. And finally, we get to the 5th S, which is sustain or shisuke. And here we're creating a culture of continuous improvement. Sustaining the 5S principles takes commitment from everyone in the organization, not just machine operators, not just someone working in the front office or sitting in the corner office. It takes commitment from everyone from the top of the business all the way down to the bottom. And the first way to make sure we are sustaining is to make sure, first of all, that everyone's trained and understand what 5S means when we're communicating that, right? It's a language we need to share, communicate, and train on. The second thing we need to do is we need to create audits. Now, don't get carried away with the audits. Remember, if we have a good culture, the audits aren't quite as needed as often as they would be if we don't have a good culture. But even having a strong audit system in place can sometimes create friction. And so in a moment, I'm going to talk about that as a best practice or a pro tip that I mentioned earlier. But we do need some sort of audit system in place. Now, before we get to the pro tips, let's talk about the benefits of implementing a 5S program in your business. And the first benefit is enhanced efficiency. By eliminating clutter and creating an organized workspace, employees will be able to find things faster and be more efficient at their work. I've had my share of pushback on this, but I promise you, with just a little bit of influence, you can get people to buy into this really quickly. And again, stick around to the end. I'm gonna share a pro tip that's gonna help you out with that. The second benefit is improved safety. Employee morale is a side benefit of 5S because listen, when people have clean facilities to go into, it gives them a better sense of ownership and morale. Think about a building that you might work in or have worked in the past. If you go in and it's just dirty and things are laying everywhere, you're not gonna have a very good sense of pride or morale when you go to work every day. However, that same location, cleaned up, organized, nice and neat, you're gonna have a better sense of pride and morale. Nobody wants to work in a dirty workspace. And as I mentioned before, without 5S, you can forget the rest. So really, 5S is the catalyst for continuous improvement. It's the foundation for implementing other improvement techniques like lean. Remember, we're doing this for the area to make the space clean, but we're really doing it because we want people to feel proud of where they work. We want people to be safe when they go to work, and we want them to start thinking in a continuous improvement and lean manner. And that's really how the culture starts to lean and think about continuous improvement on a regular basis. Now, before we wrap up, I want to share some pro tips. I mentioned I would, so let's do that now. The first pro tip is really dividing up the 5S's, right? These 5S's are for everyone, but we can divide these up into people that own the areas that are being 5S. These could be the operators or the area owners. And there are 2 S's that really should be the supervisors or managers' responsibility. Sort, set in order, and shine, the first 3 S's, should be the area owner. And so if I have a desk here, this is my responsibility, right? I need to keep my desk clean. I need to sort, set in order, and shine. Those are my 3 S's. Now, if someone were to come in and audit me, like my supervisor or management, they would cover the last 2 S's, and that is to create the standard and then sustain that, right? So if you think about a workspace in manufacturing or in the office, or the workspace in manufacturing is certainly going to be the responsibility of the area owner or the machine operator or whoever's working that space and owns that space. They're going to want to make sure they cover the first 3 S's. When it comes to the last 2 S's, the sustain or the standardize and sustain, you want to make sure those 2 S's are done by the supervisor, right? They can set the standard, make sure that it's sustained, but you don't want them auditing themselves, right? You don't want the area operator who's covering the first 3 S's to audit themselves. So that's how you can divide those 2 up, because you got to understand, if it's not important to the leaders, it probably won't be important to the people who work in the areas, at least not until we get the culture established. Now, before I get to the last few pro tips, I want to tell you a funny story about me and a young engineer. As a young engineer, young Chad, I was an engineer at a company, and I had learned about 5S, and I really took it way too far. So far, in fact, that I would go and I'm embarrassed to say this. I would literally tape my computer off and my keyboard off, and I would tape off my mouse, and I would label it keyboard and mouse. Obviously, I hadn't grasped what really 5S is all about. It's not about that kind of 5S, and it's not to that nth degree. So don't do that, right? And it really became obvious to me that I was pushing this thing too far when one day I was going to a meeting. So I cut through a back area where a lot of maintenance folks cut through in their work area. It was a shortcut to get to the meeting room. And I noticed there was a white square in the corner, right? It was taped off. And so I was like, who would tape off a white square in the corner? So I started walking over to this white square, and as I got closer, I noticed that there were some dead bugs that were taped off, and they were literally labeled dead bugs. So it was in that moment that I realized I was taking 5S too far, and not just with my desk. I was pushing this throughout the factory. So Don't be like young Chad. Don't push it too far. In fact, you want to make sure you're given some leeway. And I'm going to give you some tips here that's going to help you out with that. So here are pro tips 2, 3, and 4. If you are implementing 5S in your business, don't be too strict at first. You want to promote a sense of ownership, and you want to promote a sense that this is not a bad thing. And I've certainly been guilty of doing this, of going into a facility or an area in a facility and doing a 5S audit and giving them like a 20, right? Or a 30 because they didn't meet all the check boxes. And this is not what you want to do. Now, I know it may go against what you think you should do, right? Why would I give them a 70 or an 80 if they're not there? Again, it's about communication and it's about the culture. If you can go in and help them learn one thing from the audit or 2 things from the audit that maybe they didn't already know, and then help them increase their score, maybe get like an 80 before you write that score down and send it out in an email, this is going to help them understand what it is you're looking for. Maybe they haven't heard of 5S, or maybe they just did a couple of things wrong, and you want to show them that you have skin in the game, that you want to help them. You don't just want to go out there and audit them and give them a bad score, right? So I like having like a plan. In other words, I like writing it down on paper first. If I'm implementing a 5S program and I know I'm going to have an audit in place, of course I am, because that's part of the 5S, right? You have to standardize and sustain. Great. Well, when I do my 5S audit, I go, listen, I know that this is a journey. And on my first maybe 3 or 4 months, when I go out and do my audits, it's going to be, yes, about auditing, but also about communication and teaching. So I go out and do an audit, and I know internally what the score is. We already know it's bad 5S. You don't really need to, once you're good at doing 5S and you've been around 5S a lot, you can kind of walk in and know what the score is mentally before you even bring out an audit sheet, right? So there's no need to beat everybody up. You go out into those areas and you use the first few months as a communication tool and a teaching tool, and you still give them a relatively good score. Again, it's not about demeaning anyone. It's not about beating anybody up and giving them a bad score, making them feel bad about their area, which, by the way, if you do that, that's not going to promote any type of culture. So don't do that. Go out, set that strategy, maybe 3, 4, 5 months, and set the trajectory of where you want to be over time. So if it makes you feel any better, you can go in and put the score in of what it was really before you did your teaching and communication, and then they got the 80. So maybe it was like a 30 before, 30%. Then they got the 80% because you taught them and you really want to promote the culture. And then over time, you can see if you're really getting better before you go out there. But again, if you're doing this the right way and they're really buying into 5S and they're putting in the effort, you won't even need to see that score, because you'll go out and see the site and be like, oh, look, I mean, this is getting better, right? You know if 5S is getting better. So don't be like I was. Don't go out and beat folks up and give them bad scores. Go out and really promote the culture, right? And that's what you're trying to do. Set the trajectory, set the journey, make sure you write it down the pathway, and then go out and help people. And that's what Lean and all of this is about anyway, really helping people. And tip number 3 is to have 5S training as part of your onboarding training. Usually when companies hire in folks, they'll have some sort of an onboarding training class, and you want to make sure that 5S is part of that. And what I like to do as part of the training is, sure, have the sit down classroom training, but then have them break up into 3, 4, 5 teams and then go out to the actual manufacturing floor. Pick an area that's not very well 5S. Usually I do this beforehand to make sure, we can get some training out of this. And then, or pick an area in the office that's not very well 5S, split up the teams and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and practice what we just learned, and I want you to 5S these areas all the way up through the Standardize. And then for the audit section, I have them cross audit. So they would go and audit each other's teams, and I had them practice exactly what we just talked about. Practice not just giving them a bad score if the 5S wasn't set up properly, but helping them by using that moment as a coaching and teaching session as well, which gives them an all-around 5S experience. And it gives them a preview of how they're going to be audited when they go out into the site and start working themselves, right? And they see me walking over, or somebody else is from my team walk over and start auditing. They know what the process is going to be like. And tip number 4, and this is something that I did working for a Fortune 500 company in the office area, and that was I was getting a lot of pushback when I was trying to get them to clean their desks up and really have a good 5S. Now, this is after I've had some experience, and I was like, man, I really want them to 5S their desks, because it's, some of these guys are engineers like me, but they are really messy. Let's just put it that way. So instead of me constantly pushing them and getting that same push back, right? Action, reaction. I decided to, in one of our all hands meetings, I said, listen, what I want you to do is, I'm not going to tell you what your desk should look like. But at the end of the day today, I want you to really give it a good effort and 5S your desk. And I committed to walking around at the end of the day and looking at their desks. And what I did was I walked around and I took pictures of their desks. And then I emailed that picture to them. And I said, great, your desks all look great. What I want you to do is I want you to print out this picture and post it on your desk. And at the end of every day, make sure your desk looks like this. And that's all you got to do. And when I did my 5S audits, I didn't really need to walk around with a clipboard or anything. My standard was the standard on their desk. And it was either good or bad. Either it looked like the picture or didn't look like the picture. And now listen, here's the thing again, creating that culture. So if they had a pencil out of place or something, a piece of paper was out of place, no, I'm not going to ding them for that. It's either good or no good, right? You either have a good work desk, good 5S desk, or you don't. And again, once you establish that culture, you don't really need to score it. You can just go around and look and see. The 5S methodology really does offer a structured approach in enhancing any business or organization, and it puts you on the path towards continuous improvement and lean. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share this video. If you want to share this, it gives you a little link and code and to share it with other people that might be interested in 5S, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching today's video. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.